Week 17 of the fantasy football season with the championship on the line this week for most fantasy owners. Here's a few running backs I looked at off the wire this week. The first back, Gus Edwards of the Los Angeles Chargers. Edwards is the main back over there for this Charger team. I know most weeks it's relying on a touchdown or he's not going to get his points, is Gus Edwards. And just going off track record the last few games. Week 14 at Kansas City, 10 carries, 36 yards, a touchdown. Week 15 versus Tampa, 8 carries, 23 yards. And week 16 versus Denver, 14 carries, 68 yards, 2 touchdowns, a catch, 3 yards. So right now available in 52% of fantasy leagues. Here's Gus Edwards. Like I said, he's the starting back for Vidal, the third down back and change of pace back as well for this Charger team. But right now, while he's out there still in 52% of fantasy leagues, and it was one of the better games of the season for Gus Edwards in that one versus a good defense versus the Denver Broncos last week. He's definitely a waiver wire pickup, and he's got a good matchup week 17 at the Patriots. Next back's Alexander Madison of the Las Vegas Raiders. Alexander Madison, him and Abdullah pretty much split in that week 11 victory versus Jacksonville Jaguars, and he had a good ball game. 12 carries, 27 yards, goal line touchdown, 4 catches, 29 yards on 7 targets. So week 17, a good matchup at the Saints. They give up the 10th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So Madison out there in 52% of fantasy leagues. He's a physical back. Not great in between the tackles, yard per carry, but definitely this season he's been better as a wide receiver. So right now, if you need a back with some guys banged up or underperforming, or you're just in the deepest of leagues, he's definitely a running back. I would add off the wire this week, next back, his teammate Amir Abdullah of the Las Vegas Raiders. One of the better third down backs over the last few weeks in fantasy football has been Amir Abdullah for this Vegas team. And obviously most games they're trailing, and he's really been on a tear, is Abdullah, when he's had an expanded role. So going back to week 12 versus Denver, 8 carries, 28 yards, 5 catches, 37 yards, a touchdown. Then week 15, another expanded role when McCormick went down versus Atlanta, 3 carries, 8 yards, 7 catches, 58 yards, and a touchdown. In week 16 versus Jacksonville, 7 carries, 38 yards, a touchdown, 5 catches, 47 yards. So week 17, same obviously for him. Good matchup at the Saints, 10th most fantasy points to backs. And in an indoor ball game on the fast track, it always obviously helps the offense on that fast track. So this week I think Abdullah could go out there and be a serviceable running back for owners this week. The next back, Patrick Taylor of the San Francisco 49ers. Taylor out there right now in 53% of fantasy leagues. And to be honest, Deebo Samuel looked like more of the lead back in that game. So Taylor definitely got some work, but not much. 8 carries, 24 yards, catch 1 yard. So week 17, not a great matchup versus the Lions. Obviously, it could be a game where the Lions get off to a good start early and often, and they have to abandon the run. So like I said, Taylor's more of a deeper league ad, even though he's still out there in 53% of fantasy leagues. But Deebo Samuel, for the most part, he split with him in that ball game with Taylor, and his upside just isn't going to be there, I believe. But still someone to add off the wire this week. Next back, Audric Estime of the Denver Broncos. Estime, to be honest, in that Thursday night game last week, looked like the best back in the backfield. He had more juice. He was running in between the tackles pretty well. And this week, a pretty good matchup at Cincinnati that gives up the 17th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So week 15 versus Indianapolis, 5 carries, 13 yards, a catch, 5 yards. And week 16, like I said, at the Chargers, he looked good, 9 carries, 48 yards, and he found the end zone. So I know they used 3 backs by committee there, Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Audric Estime is his Denver Bronco team, but you just don't know with the carousel with Sean Payton at the running back position. But this week, I think Estime still could be the better running back for this Denver Bronco team, and he's available in 93% of fantasy leagues. Next back's Michael Carter of the Arizona Cardinals. Yes, the same Michael Carter who was a New York Jet and the starting running back a few seasons ago. So Carter filled in the week 16 tough loss in overtime at Carolina after James Conner went down with knee injury, and Trey Benson, he was inactive. DeMarcado was inactive. So I don't know the statuses of those guys, but Michael Carter came in and he looked pretty decent. 5 carries, 18 yards, 5 catches, 30 yards in that game. So he's always been a decent receiving back out of the backfield, is Michael Carter. DJ Dallas, who I'm going to mention in a minute here as well, came in the goal line running back in that ball game at the Panthers. So Michael Carter, like I said, he's got the experience as a starter. Benson, DeMarcado, we don't know their status, but Carter looked good in this ball game, and he helped them get down the field to force overtime. So right now, if you're in the deepest of leagues and a possibility Carter gets some decent touches in week 17, he's available right now in tons of fantasy leagues in 99%. And it's a decent matchup on the fast track at the Rams in the final Running back I looked at off the wire is his teammate DJ Dallas of the Arizona Cardinals. DJ Dallas, former Seattle Seahawk. He had some run a little bit a few years ago, and then like I said in this game, in the Week 16 game at Carolina, he had one catch, a yard, and a touchdown in that one. So Michael Carter obviously looked like the lead back in that ball game once James Conner went out with injury. But you just never know who's going to be the back. And DJ Dallas, he's more in between the tackles back, with Michael Carter more of a receiving backs if you want to play it safe, especially the James Conner owner going into the championship this week. I would look to add both of them, and he's available on 99% of fantasy leagues. That's a few running backs I looked at off the wire for Week 17 of the fantasy football season.